All right. Welcome, guys, back to the self-selecting podcast. Hello. There is video, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube. I don't think Spotify, I don't think they do the video. I think you just get the audio. So if you're wanting to watch me, no, I'm not even going to finish that sentence because that's not going to lead anywhere good. I've got a video on. I've got a video of me. It's nothing exciting, relax. But if you want video, because a couple people requested that, okay, yeah, video. There we go. I'm not making any promises. I'm going to do my best. I'm holding it together. I'm holding it together to the best of my ability. Welcome, episode 8. Episode 8. 8 weeks. 8 weeks of podcasting, and I'm really excited to be back with you guys. Thank you so much for the feedback on the last couple episodes, particularly the one with Eric. Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I'm so glad you guys did. He's so good at what he does. All of those guys are, and I would like to have I have the next guest picked out. You will just have to wait and see. But if there's someone that you're specifically like, hey, I want this person on, I want to hear y'all talk, definitely leave it in the comments below. I would appreciate that. That would help. So episode 5, we're gonna circle back to this in a second. But first, let me tell you, I moved on Sunday. I'm in Airbnbs. That's the temporary situation. Some of you very observant. Very in tune when I am in a new location. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have mixed feelings actually, but yeah, I did move. This new place, it's great. I have truly nothing to complain about because I live in Southern California, almost on the beach. I shouldn't be complaining, but I'm going to. I moved, of course, there were problems. It was a lot. It was a very tiring day. It's not what I want to be doing during finals, but again, I do this to myself. Like I'm in charge of my schedule, and I'm just like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll be fine. I'll make it work. Moved in, very tiring amidst finals, amidst work, just a lot of things, and come in, and I'm like, fuck, I'm really hot. Like I'm sweating, which I 18 trips. I don't even have that much shit. Like I really don't. 18 trips, downstairs, upstairs. Cool. Okay. A lot of work. I figured, okay, I'm running around literally sweating. So that's probably what that is. Get in, and like I see there's like a heater, which we had a heater like at Patrick's site. We had a heater, but it was just always disconnected. It was never turned on because Southern California, we don't need that. Like it's never, I think the lowest temperature it's been is like 40 degrees, and that's not even a true like 40 degrees. It doesn't feel the same. We're very very privileged out here in terms of temperature. The discrepancy is very narrow. My point being, we don't need a heater. Walk into the apartment, I'm sweating, see the heater. As I'm walking by it, I hear a hum, and I'm like, nope, no. Look at the thermostat. It's set to 0. It's clearly producing heat. I touch the metal. Hot. Yes, heat is coming from the heater. So I have been waiting for 2.5 days for Airbnb host to return my message, for maintenance to come out. Literally left the gym mid-workout because, oh, hey, we're here. We need you. Okay. All right. I'm on my way. Amazing. It's fixed. Drawn out story to tell you it's fixed. I'm probably staying here. It's fixed. It's fine. I'm fine. I've got one more exam. That was a whole thing last week. A live review for nursing. Okay, y'all know the deal. So almost done with nursing. I don't know what I'm going to do. I feel like the eye contact to the camera, it's a little too intimate. So enjoy me if you're watching, which just put it on while you're doing something else. Don't give me, I don't need that kind of attention. Like just put it on while you're, I don't know, doing the dishes, like stretching, doing cardio. What are we talking about today? Well, okay. Episode 5 was a very big hit. It was one that a lot of people, they shared on social media. And they were really appreciative of like the vulnerability I shared with challenges with going through like the muscle building phase and like how that affects you from a body dysmorphia standpoint. And really what tangibles, like what specific things can you expect in ways to just like, I don't know, to help keep you motivated while you're in that really difficult part of what we do, a part of bodybuilding. And if you don't compete, it doesn't like, it's not to say you don't go through the same thing. This is something that I've spoken to many women about at this point, and there's a lot of women who have these feelings, whether they ever get on a stage or not. So this isn't something that's like only a qualifier if you're actually getting on stage. I think getting on stage makes it so much worse, but I think it's also something that inherently a lot of us just have, like, we just have programmed into us, because I mean, from a very, very young age, I know for myself, I was informed that I need to not stand with my belly out, my cute 4 or 5-year-old little tummy. I had a relative swat my tummy and tell me to stand with better posture, because there was no reason to be standing with my stomach out. And yeah, that clearly didn't have any issues. I've been doing vacuums since I was 4. Since that day, I've been just like, yeah. So you want to know the secret, just have very early onset of that specific kind of trauma relative to your waist. And then that's how you keep a tiny waist. Despite, God, I do not mean that seriously. I realize now someone pointed this out recently. They were like, I can't really tell when you're joking. I'm like, I'm probably not joking. Sometimes I am, but not all the time. Sometimes I'm being quite serious, but it's a little, yeah. Body dysmorphia is, I think, for a lot of us, something that we've dealt with our entire life. I can say for myself, it's something that in almost every instance of whatever phase I'm in, there is a dissatisfaction with where I am compared to where I want to be. And there have been like brief moments where I felt like the physique that I have, that I'm holding, that is not permanent whatsoever, because it never feels permanent. It feels so fleeting and accidentally caught. That's how I would explain it. There's been a few moments where I've been very, very satisfied. And there was a point where I just figured, okay, I'm only going to get those moments, those moments of feeling like, okay, you go into whatever, the dressing room, and like you try on like so many different clothes and you're like, okay, I don't hate this. That's pretty, sadly, that's pretty standard. I think that's most people. Some of us talk about it, some of us don't. When I got into the sport of competing, that was a way for me to like rationalize. I don't want to say an obsession, but it was like very much a fixation on like, I want this to be better than it currently is, in whatever way I need to do that. And that's what competing, I mean, initially that was kind of the footprint it left until the show period, the prep itself, until you were done with that. And then you feel lost, which is pretty common. That's pretty standard for most people, is they get done with the show. They have nothing that they're working towards anymore. And really they're just like, they're kind of idling by. They're going through the motions of like, I'm going through I want to call it a health phase, but I will not call it a health phase, because that's not what the fuck it is. It's just time not spent dieting. And I think that's a much better way to describe this. It's time spent not in a contest prep. That period for a lot of people can be very aimless. And let me just like, I want to relate to like, I want to tie this in for listeners who are not competitors either. That phase in between dieting, it's the same thing. You get ready, you go on vacation, or you have like an event coming up, you diet down for it, you're getting married, and you're like, okay. And then after you're like, oh, this is kind of depressing. Like I kind of have some post-event blues, like whatever it is. Because at that point, you've put so much focus onto this one single day or a string of days or achieving, like crossing that finish line. And now you're like, okay, where do I go? And that's where, like in the last episode, I'm not going to just like repeat all the concepts I said before. If you want to go back and listen to that, please do. But I want to expand on some points that a few people made to me like later in messages that I felt were really important, and I don't feel like I unpacked as well. So you go through that shift, and like the actual whatever it is in competition, this is an easy example to kind of depict. The moments on stage where you win or you like are rewarded or you're just on stage, because not everyone wins. Some people just get on stage, they get whatever call out, and then that is their reward, just simply being on the stage. It's so fleeting. Before you know it, it's over. I remember when I turned pro, it was just so fast paced. It was so rushed, and they had us on stage for like 20 minutes. It was not actually rushed, but how it felt, like I couldn't hold on to, like I can remember it obviously, but like it felt like it was over before I could even soak it in. And that's where I think like you have to be really honest about, okay, why are you getting into the sport of it? And there's several reasons you can, none of which are wrong. It's just, if you're getting into this sport for that moment that from a ceremonial standpoint is gone, it's over, it's done, before you realize it, like, yes, you can get back on stage, but you can't do it. It is finite. Like, I mean, you can't do it endlessly. There are people who do it a lot and who compete a lot, and there are people who get a lot out of the sport, but like, that isn't something that doesn't have consequences. Same thing with dieting. Before I ever competed, I was on a trajectory of just getting leaner and skinnier. I was living in New York. I was like training for a marathon. No, I was training to get leaner. That's what I was doing. And I was like, cardio, yeah, this works. I don't want to be bulky. And like, I was like working up my mileage because I'm like, oh, more fat loss, more calories. It was really disordered. It was like, I think we have to approach that phase post diet, post contest. I think we need to approach it in a different way, but we need to prepare for it before we actually get to that point. Because I think personally, I find it very hard to feel grounded, to feel anchored in that post-show phase, because so much is still happening. Like I'm in that, I'm done with the show. So yeah, like the stress should be technically over, but there's a big adjustment. Like, I mean, like certain drugs might be coming out, cardio is changing, like your life is slowly unraveling in a lot of ways. It's shifting, and you're adjusting your schedule, you're adjusting everything that you've been doing for, let's say, the last 2-3 months. And now all of a sudden, nothing looks the same. And I'll share this. Like yesterday fucking sucked. Like it was not a great day. I was very sad, and I struggled emotionally quite a bit yesterday because I didn't anticipate feeling so unsettled after multiple days of moving, of trying to like put all of my shit together and then like move it. And even though the proximity, it's not like I was moving very far, but I'm like, okay, like I'm moving, and like now this is a new home. And like, I think I underestimated how I felt in the other apartment. Like when I initially moved out, it was very overwhelming, but I found my routine very quickly. And like, I developed my own, like, okay, this is what I like to do in this order, and this is where everything goes, and everything has a place. And I feel very grounded on account that there's an intention, there's a reason for everything. Everything makes sense. There's a structure here. And now I'm in this new place. And when I moved in, I was like, I don't know where I want to put everything. And I'm like, okay, just You need to be able to make these decisions very quickly. You don't have a lot of time to just like sit and wait. Like you have things you need to do. Not everything has to go away right now, but like you do have to like you got to keep moving forward. That's really like what I was trying to tell myself. And even the first night I was like annoyed. I was like, fuck, I really like the other unit better. This one is fine, but I was like the heater and like the layout and like little things. And I was like, okay, what's like actually going on here? And I think inadvertently I was not prepared for the shift that was going to come with like, okay, I just moved into a new, and even though it's very close, I'm like, now everything is different. Okay, well now I have to reestablish that routine. And there's been a lot of that for me in every aspect of life lately, figuring out what does my structure look like, and like what do I need? Fuck, this sounds so stupid. What do I need to feel like safe and secure and thrive? And every time you're in a new environment, every time that like the goal shifts or really the environment changes, I think particularly for people who like routine and like that structure and regimen, it can take a little bit of a refractory to acclimate to whatever that is. And it's not even that, like I've traveled a lot like the last month or so, and I've been like in and out of hotels, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, this is like, you have to be able to navigate this, and you have to be able to expect that things will not go as planned. And the better you can be at controlling your reaction and not even controlling, but just like, okay, this fucking sucks, but like, okay, let's problem solve, and now let's get back to equilibrium. Like that is going to ultimately help you in these scenarios, because they're going to probably keep happening just given the nature of just moving and not really having like a true home base. And it's something I'm working on. But yesterday particularly, I guess I was like so frazzled because of this. I hate that word. Like why? I don't know. I could have used any word. I felt felt so off balance. And I think it reminded me a lot of like the day after a show, or really like the Monday or Tuesday, because it's usually a couple days for me. The first day I'm still like on cloud nine. I still feel really good. And like if I traveled, like the plane ride coming home after a show, I'm like, yeah, like, you know, I'm really pumped. And I mean, it's dopamine, like left and right. Like you're seeing people are asking how the show went. Even if it didn't go like perfectly, you're still like, you're getting a lot of positive reinforcement for this thing you just did. And you're getting to talk about it, and kind of still, you're no longer being present. You're still living through whatever happened over the weekend. And, you know, maybe you're talking about like future plans with competing and like what the judges said. And like you're disassociating from what you're actually feeling, which is okay. Well, Sunday after the show, you're probably not training. Maybe some of you are, sometimes I did, but there was a point, maybe even Sunday night, Monday morning, I would wake up and be like, okay, what am I going to do? And like try to find that, like that footing. That's what I was fucking trying to say earlier. It just came to me. Finding your footing, that can be really hard when you just spent a lot of time focusing on one specific goal. And now it's not even that you're moving in the opposite direction immediately. It's just that you are no longer moving. You're no longer moving forward. And I think that can be scary for a lot of people. I think that can feel very foreign after you've spent like months at this point focused in. Like your success was based on your ability to continue to execute despite physically your body saying, I don't want to do this. Mentally, I don't want to do this. You fought through that, and you created these new patterns of thinking and cognitions around what needed to happen and how you needed to feel in order to get through it. And now you're kind of left. You're like, I no longer am working towards that goal right this moment, but I still am working towards that goal long term. So how do I continue working towards it, but not like sprinting? because that's essentially, I mean, like there's no getting off the ride when you're in a prep. Not really. I mean, like it can happen. You can have to pull out of a prep. You can have to be like, hey, we're going to push the show back. But ultimately, like if a prep, assuming like everything's going well, the goal is to make it to the show you planned for. And if like you're getting ready for an event and you're like, okay, well, like I'll just use the wedding. Like, okay, here's my wedding day. Like the idea isn't to be like, okay, 6 weeks out, oh, I'm not going to be able to hit my target for my weight loss or whatever it is. The goal is to be able to achieve said weight loss, said target by that date. And now all of a sudden you're idling, and maybe you had a plan, maybe you didn't. But that like Monday, Tuesday, that first week, I mean, like it's different for each person, but maybe there's a couple days where you kind of take it like, oh, I'm just going to enjoy myself. I'm just going to like have fun with it. I'm not going to stress. I'm going to go out, have some foods that I, did never get to eat. I know I'm not going to consistently eat. I'm going to treat myself. Cool. But there typically is that onset of, I don't even want to call it depression, but like anxiety, Sunday scaries. But it's like, it's more, I would say it's a little more profound, because it's not just Sunday. It's like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what's the plan? How do I know if I'm on track? Because again, you had these metrics in place. You had something in place that was driving you, that told you green light, red light. No, you're not doing good enough. So here is the reaction when you're not doing good enough. Here's the negative reinforcement. You didn't lose enough weight this week. We only have, 8 weeks left. Okay, we need to turn it up. We need to increase cardio. We need to decrease food. You no longer have that framework to work in, as far as like, okay, you didn't lose weight. Now here's what needs to happen for us to still hit our target weight here in 8 weeks. That means we're going to have to increase cardio by set amount. Now you're in a position where it's like, okay, weight is going to move the opposite way. It just moved. Weight is going to come back up. If it hasn't already, it's going to come back up like fairly quickly, much faster than you assume. Some people, they've got like really good ways that they can manage this, and like mentally they're like, you know what, I am okay with it, because I can see further down the pipeline and I can understand that like this all needs to happen. That is the exception. Very few people, I think, are just built that way, where naturally they're going to be able to understand that like their very first show, they're just going to, yep, okay, whatever happens. Like I'm going to disassociate so hard, because I can have the foresight to see that this is productive. Well, very few people are going to be able to do that. And I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily like the best way to approach it, because I do think that you need to feel whatever it is you're feeling. If you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling like, if you're feeling anxiety around the weight gain, if you're feeling anxiety around like, well, how do I know that like I'm not gaining too fast? Whatever it is, you do need to focus on just simply naming it first, and which I think I talked about this, like activate your prefrontal cortex, give it a name, because until you actually can like slow down and pause and at least get out of your mind, your executive functioning, like that is not operating. It's not lit up. You name it. You name what it is you're feeling. That's where you start. Okay, you're feeling dysmorphic. What does that actually mean? Like, what does that actually feel like to you? Is that an obsession with like going to the mirror and like you're not even like focused on your body? You're like doing makeup, doing hair, but you're like kind of looking at the rest of your body simultaneously and like, oh, like I need to put more clothes on. Well, my stomach already looks like super fucking soft, and like I'm 1 week post show or 1 week post diet. Slowing down and actually realizing, okay, what is happening? Like, physiologically, what is occurring right now? Are you holding your breath? Are you like just very like tense and like rigid? And are you finding it hard like to not look at your appearance when you walk by a mirror, because you're wanting to I guess objectify, you're wanting to assess, like that's what we call it to sound a little less disordered, but like really what it is are you trying to see something that is not going to be there? And are you signing up to disappoint yourself every single time you do these weird, I say weird, knowing like they're fucking weird when I do it. I like, to me, I'm like, yo, like you're trying to ruin your day. Like, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think this was going to play out? Oh, you're in a bad headspace. You think obsessing over the body and trying to get in front of a mirror and see what you don't have because you know that like, hey, I'm not on stage. I'm not my leanest. I'm not like in peak week anymore. You think that's going to help at all right now? It's not. It's not. It's actually, it's going to perpetuate this rumination. What you're going to do then, okay, well, I'm going to walk away. And then I'm going to come back. I'm going to circle back and I'm going to do the same thing. And then later today when okay, how much fatter am I? Like I'm speaking from a place of personal experience, but I'm speaking to conversations that like whenever I've had a few people post show where they're like, I'm really struggling. I'm really having a hard time toughing it out. And I know like logically, my non-lizard brain, I know that this needs to happen. I know that like, in order to build, in order to be successful, I need to go through this, but it's killing me. Like it is such a mind fuck, like going through this. And I'm like, okay, rather than just tell them it's normal, everyone goes through this. I'm like, walk me through what this actually looks like. Okay, we have this feeling, we have this thing. How does that present? What are the symptoms? Like, okay, the mirror thing, cool. I'm not going to tell you to like cover up your mirrors in your house. I'm not going to be like, oh, don't do that. I am going to be like, hey, when you notice that like obsessive like compulsion to get in front of the mirror and to like try to like pose a little bit at like very obscure times, I am going to be like, hey, be honest. Like if you're just doing it like one off, okay. But if you're finding that it's a repeated habit and then every time you do it, it is making you feel shittier about how you look. And then that is now spiraling into, well, now I feel stressed out. And now I'm like obsessing over, okay, when am I going to be back into prep? When am I going to see my abs? Am I doing everything correctly? Like, should I be doing more? I wonder if this training program is actually effective or if it's just like a standardized like cookie cutter program. Maybe I need to be doing higher volume. Like there's all these thoughts that go through people's head as they're spiraling. And I think the very first step is identifying, I mean, yes, like what it is, what that feels like. What are you trying to protect yourself from? Because it's deep-seated. I understand it. You worked towards this goal for so long. You worked towards building a body that is reflective of what you want the outward world to see. Landed that. If you told me like, hey, like you're gonna work towards something, but about halfway through, it's not gonna look like you're actually working towards it. It's gonna look like you're losing the progress that you just worked so hard to get to showcase when in this sport. Like the observable changes, that's what we're complimented on. That's what we're rewarded on. It's like, yeah, that's discouraging. That's hard. You just went from like, and I know the prep is hard. The prep in itself is something that like a lot of people, they can't hack. Let me tell you, even more people who can't hack the prep, even more than the people who can, a good majority of them cannot do the off season, cannot do the post show, the reverse, the building. They can't do that right because it is too fucking challenging. Like mentally, it is such a big ask. And I'm not going to say it's just for female athletes. It is hard for men too, but I do think that there are differences in how, I think there are differences in the expectation around weight gain, specifically when it comes to women, as opposed to men. I think on the female side of things, we got like a 5 to 10 pound like range. And if you exceed that, if you're like 15, 20, we start to look like less and less, like much less like we did on stage. So much so that it looks like, well, do you even work out? And this is largely true the less muscle you have. Like, I mean, in the bigger divisions, like, yeah, you still look jacked even at a higher body fat, but like the less muscle you have, the more average you're going to look during this phase. And that's where you really do have to you have to take this into account as a coach, but also as an athlete. Like, you have to understand, like, hey, it is okay to have these feelings. Where are they stemming from? You're not wanting to be misunderstood. That's a big part of it, right? Like, you're wanting people, you got into the sport because you're wanting to showcase something that matters to you, in whatever specific capacity, in whatever way that, like, hey, like, I want to get on stage because I want to prove to myself that I do have it in me to be adherent and be disciplined and do something very scary and very vulnerable. And I want to ask to be judged on my body, which we're all judged on our body every single day, but I want that feedback, and I want to compete against people who also want that feedback. I mean, that's like the fucked up part of this sport, is like, we're asking to have someone be hypercritical against very hypercritical people. Yeah, like it's a very vulnerable thing to do that. And when you finish, like when you complete a season, when you complete that, it's like, what are you working towards in this next phase? Well, you're working on being better the next time you compete against those also hypercritical individuals. You're working to be able to get on stage and to say, okay, in this span of 12, 18 months, 24 months, I made these exact improvements, and I don't have to write it down for you because it's so obvious, like visibly on my physique, you can just see it that I made these improvements. That's what the off season is. You're not like, you're going to be so disappointed if you think it's like 3 months, like I'm going to look like Maureen or Laura Lee. Like, I know that's like a dumb example because no one is thinking they're going to look like them in 3 months, but even just like a fraction of that, like 3 months is a drop in the bucket. Like, I'm telling you, these people have been doing it for so long and doing it correctly for so long, to a large extent. So, like you go into this phase and you take that first challenge of like, okay, I need to accept that this next phase is going to feel differently than the phase I just went through, the contest prep, the fat loss. This next phase is going to have its new set of challenges because very much so it's its own game. It is going to require a different set of skills, similar and falling all under the umbrella of like bodybuilding, but also the things that helped you be successful in prep aren't exclusively the same tools that we need for our growth phase, for our off season. Those things, like they can be beneficial and sure, there's some overlap, but largely you're starting at square one. You were starting over, and a lot of it, you were going to be fighting against the physiological adaptations that occur from the prep itself. The elevated hunger despite body fat going up. Mentally, that's a mind fuck. Body fat's up. Why wouldn't I feel satiated? Because the last time I was this fat, I felt very satiated. I felt like I was eating so much more and weight wasn't moving as much. It's a consequence of getting as lean as you need to get. It's a consequence of ignoring the hunger signaling for so long. Like, you were in a state of like complete disassociation, like fighting your body cellularly. You were doing that, and now your body's like, yo, you got some debt to pay off. Like, let me show you what you did. Hold on. And that's just the physiological side. That's not the mental side, the psychosocial, the behavioral side of like, hey, I use food as a coping mechanism, which so many people in the sport do. I'm going to be honest, it's a better coping mechanism than drugs and alcohol. It's a better coping mechanism than a whole laundry list of things that if I had to pick, I mean, like, the lesser of two evils, this one is like, yeah, it's going to affect you, but it has less of a likelihood of affecting those around you. Even then, it's very easy to dig yourself into a hole when using food to cope. And I know, like, people, they tend to fall into like one or two camps. Like, hey, you either want it bad enough or you don't. And if you don't want it bad enough, you're not a true competitor. And I just think it's just such a cop out to like go into the space as like a coach or educator with that mindset. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't show up with like the skill set, like perfectly attuned to the needs your very first time. Like, you suck at this. You should suck at this. Who in their right mind would know how to handle this? Like, just innately, like, oh, you know how to fight hunger signaling that has been dysregulated for so many months when it's their first time getting this lean. It's your first time going through it. And I don't know, it's a lot to ask of people. And like, I mean, there's a few people that come to mind when I say this, because it really, I do take it personally, because I'm like, who the fuck are you to like tell someone that you're supposed to have this skill developed? Like, now I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't make it personal, but it is something that it disappoints me. The apathy that comes with individuals who are unwilling to teach that skill, that skill of dieting. Because I mean, essentially that is what it is. For a lot of people, this is something that, frankly, like, it might not look perfect, and maybe perfect isn't even in the realm of possibility. Maybe perfect is unattainable at the current skill level. So we don't go for perfect. Like in any other sport, you adjust. Like, you're kind of going to move, not any other sport, but you are going to move the goalpost according to where the athlete is. Like, you need to meet the client where they are, which, like, is not a new concept. Like, that's something that very good coaches, very good trainers, influencers, educators in the space, like influencers meaning people who actually influence, like people in the space widely accept that if you are trying to help someone develop a skill set, it doesn't start with just like telling them like, here's minimum threshold. Like, oh, you're not here. Okay. Can't help you. Like, there's a way to pull out progress for that individual. And I just think it's so shitty to delineate someone's entire, I guess, identity or potential based on their state before that skill is actually developed. Like, yes, there are gradients to, okay, well, this person is better suited for this, and oh, this person is really struggling at a point that I would say generally on average most people shouldn't struggle with. I've had to do that. I've had clients who, like, very early on into a prep, I could just tell them, like, they're probably not going to see out this prep, and that's okay, because their goal was to see out this prep. But I realize based on their current skill set, that's not going to be possible. Like, I'm going to be shocked. And frankly, I'm going to feel bad because I don't know at a certain point if it's ethical to push someone past so far when I know they can handle, when I know that like they're already spread so thin. At a certain point as a coach, and I'm not saying every coach does this, there are a lot of coaches who don't. They're like, you hired me to prep. Like, if you are willing to do it, I will take you there. And I mean, that's a big reason I turned pro. Like, I didn't complain like at all. But I also was so far past what I could actually tolerate. I'm really good at disassociating, and like, and Shane was like, yeah, like I will take you there because you hired me to do that. And that's something I respect him for, because I think that is that can be a part of leveling up, is pushing yourself to overreach even past what, potentially your coach, your mentor, what others expect of you. And that ultimately has to come intrinsically. That isn't going to be something that someone can like convince you or drag you across the finish line. But with certain athletes, I kind of knew from the start. I'm like, if this person, if what they're telling me is an accurate representation of how they're actually feeling, if they're being 100% honest, if this is not exaggerated, which I have no reason to believe it is, then I have to really assess, okay, how hard can I push them? And is it worth pushing them so far past what they can tolerate? Because ultimately, it's like a rubber band. Like however much you swing in the opposite direction of dysregulation, you're going to swing just as hard on the way back. And it's kind of what I alluded to before, is that you're accruing debt. Like you're going to have to pay it off at some point. And the more debt that you accrue during that fat loss phase, during the contest prep, well, it could come like crushing down on you. Like depending on your credit limit. And like, that's really a better analogy, I think, than runways. Like, did you go into this fully prepared to push, or did you go in already at a disadvantage? Because of the people that I've seen that like they kind of gatekeep the title of like bodybuilder. Like they put like, they assign so much value to it and are so protective over it that just the sheer volume of people now in the sport threaten the quality, the integrity of it. And like, I understand, I do to some extent, but I'm also like, hey, like there are people in the sport who might not be developed, like whatever, they still have room for improvement. Like, don't we all? Like that is something that like I think generally we should be a little kinder about and not so judgmental. Like these struggles, like they feel very, they're going to feel very real for that individual, whether they actually got as lean as they needed to get or not. Like if it's their first time, it could be very, very uncomfortable. And I think going into it, assuming that the person is weak, going in, assuming that they're just not cut out for it. Ultimately, there's so many people in the sport that if that was the attitude that their coach, trainer, mentor had out the gate the first time they complained, or into a prep when someone's like really kind of losing it. How many people would be in the sport if that was just unanimously how things were handled? I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways that the competition itself can enhance something that you enjoy, something that, in a lot of ways you're already doing. Maybe you're already living the lifestyle. But I think alongside that, we also have to prepare athletes to really understand it's not just the prep that you're signing up for, it's the post-show. It's getting back to a state of like re-regulation that's going to be very challenging for a lot of people. And if you thought the prep was hard, I would expect the post-show to be just as hard. The only difference is, yes, you get more food. You do, objectively. Like inversely, like things are moving in the opposite direction. But you are giving up, you're sacrificing that immediate hit of motivation, of dopamine that you get in a prep. So, I don't know, like just like laying it out that way. It's like, do you want to do that? Are you prepared to do that? Can you do it? Or is it going to be so tough that ultimately, even just getting to stage, the rebound itself is going to put you in a position where you're like, I don't want to ever do this again. Because in order to come out of that, that's going to mean I gain 20, 25, 30 pounds. I'm talking about a female here, not a male, because men, they can gain much more than that. But it's it's a lot that you're signing up for that you don't realize. Like the terms and conditions are not explained. And even then, even by someone who cares about you, like me explaining it, I'm not saying like, not saying I'm speaking to like you guys like individually, like this is just generally for people getting into the sport or signing up to do something that is so far past anything they've ever done. You can't convey how difficult that's going to be and the frequency at which you're going to have to mitigate these thoughts, manage your emotions, regulate your emotions. So I personally would say that like the people who do really well and who are able to manage that post-show phase successfully or better, let's just say that, better than others, those are the individuals who know during prep, hey, I'm already thinking ahead and considering the actions that I'm taking now, they will have a direct role on how I come out of this. Thereby, I should make sure that I'm not doing so much that's excessive. I'm not doing things just for the fuck of it, just so that I can ultimately push a little bit harder. I mean, the more extremes you take in your prep, the more dysregulated you're going to be. And that's where it's not sustainable at all. And I know I used to say that, like, oh, you know, you can make contest prep sustainable. No, you can make it less extreme. You can take away the unnecessary suffering. Like there is an amount of suffering that is the minimum buy-in, and like you do have to accept that. But you can take away the suffering that like people are just doing to compensate for really shitty planning. And that's where I think ultimately it won't make post-show a cakewalk. It's going to make it manageable. Hopefully, that's the goal. Best case scenario is it's manageable and it's not a nightmare. Now, the other thing I have found personally pretty helpful is when I was going through those final like 3-4 weeks, I was consciously thinking of how I wanted to stick my landing once I was out of this. What did I want that period to look like? And what was I going to use to really assess how I was doing mentally? And I mean, like journaling is a really good one. I know people, they roll their eyes. I was one of those people. I rolled my eyes heavy when John first told me to start journaling. I don't even think I picked it up then. I only picked it up recently. And it's one of those things like it is very helpful in terms of slowing down your thoughts and like giving you a really good sense of, okay, am I actually feeling this? Can I express this? Can I put this out there? And I think for a lot of people, those last few weeks, you're just so focused on getting on stage, as you should be. But personally, I think it's worthwhile to go through it with your coach or even with someone who has been through the sport before, who's done this. Go through it and be like, okay, what are the known unknowns? What are the ones that generally we can expect? Our gray swans. Okay, for these, let's have some kind of systemized like way that we're going to handle it. Okay, you binge. Okay, what happens? How do we identify that it's a binge? How do we identify that this is a point of contention that needs an intervention? Versus how do we say, no, I went out to dinner because that was what I planned to do. And ultimately, I felt guilty the next day, but it is not going to be something that I categorize as a binge or a meal like off track technically. Being self-punitive, being so judgmental of these actions after the fact can be really damaging. And I want to caution you guys from doing that. I want to strongly encourage you, for one, when you're having those tendencies, that I guess I want to say anxiety, that drive to potentially like go off plan at a time that like you're like, this is not justified. This is just, I don't want to be adherent. If that's the case, okay, slow it down, find ways to almost prevent yourself from doing that. So, I mean, like the whole like hoarding food back at the house and like having a lot of things like just accessible, like very easily accessible. I'm going to say, like, until you're at a point where you're closer to being more regulated, it's probably not the best idea. Even going out to eat, I mean, like, you got to be honest, like, what kind of state are you in? Are you in a state where you can have like multiple entrees and like appetizers and get dessert, and like you can just like eat to a level of satiety that you're comfortable with? I mean, immediately after, maybe you are, but there are going to be days afterwards where your willpower, it's not as strong. And I think being able to be honest about this and truly assess and be like, hey, I'm not in a good place right now. If we have a bunch of food in front of me, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to overindulge. Now, if you're okay with that decision and you can agree that you're going to honor that decision afterwards, and you're not going to be punitive, you're not going to want to shit on yourself and then go do a bunch of cardio, and then that's going to lead to this cycle, okay. But make that pact with yourself that, hey, this decision wasn't accidental. It wasn't due to a lack of adherence or a lack of willpower. It was intentional. Like, you made this decision because you felt like it was the best decision at the time. And even though feelings after the fact, they're allowed to shift, you gotta be a good historian with this stuff. And you can't be a good historian if you're not actually present, if you're not making these decisions with intention, if you're just kind of like drifting, floating idly by, just like, oh yeah, whatever. I didn't know that this was going to happen. Like, I ordered Postmates and I figured I would just like throw away like half of it, but I really wanted to just have it here because I never like whatever insert. Okay, cool. The decisions that you make, like, I would be really cautious about delegating that to anyone else. And I would also strongly encourage you just to be aware of what you're agreeing to, once you make that decision. If you are going to have like a whole flight of like desserts, cookies, you can do that. But that might mean, like, what that is, like, you're agreeing in this moment, I am receiving this reward, this dopamine, this satisfaction from getting to indulge here. What you're giving up, the cost of that, well, it's calories, which ultimately maybe that doesn't affect you, but maybe it does. The degree in which it affects you should be considered, and you can't really appraise that if you're looking the other way every time that you go off track, or every time that you have a slip up. A lot of people, yeah, they want to take the approach like, okay, just move on, just don't think about it. Okay, well, to some extent, yes, do not be punitive, but also we need to, if this is like a reoccurring thing, we need to have a talk about like what's happening and like the damage this is doing, like what's the collateral, because if this is something that like regularly is occurring, this is how you end up gaining a lot of weight very quickly, because there's no audit. There's no point in which we're like, we gotta talk about what happened. You to you, not when you're emotional. You gotta sit down and be like, okay, is this isolated? And if it is, that's one thing. And if you can accept the consequences of like, okay, this means that I'm not going to lose as much this week or in the off season. Okay, that means I'm going to gain a little bit quicker than I would have liked to, and that's going to shorten my runway over time, but I'm not going to let this continue to happen. Therefore, I'm okay with like just chalking this up. It was a one-time thing. But if it becomes a pattern, if it becomes a behavior, this repeatedly will make it to where you're now in this off season that is likely not going to be productive, likely going to be a season that you just blow through your runway very quickly. And ultimately, it's going to lead you back to the same position where you're probably going to feel like, okay, well, the program was the issue. And maybe perhaps the program was the issue. Maybe there were aspects of the program that should have been considered. But I think that post-show period, I think it is much more intricate than we we want to believe. I think that we want it to be very standardized, and it needs to be highly individualized, because how people deal with that post-show phase, how people deal with like the experience of going through a prep and getting that lean. I mean, that is such an individual experience, and it's not something that I can tell. I mean, I can tell you the framework, I can tell you generally this would be best, but if I give you a program and like you're not able to stick to it because of this, that, or the other, or just frankly you're like, I want to stick to it, but I the best I can do is like 75% of this, well then that's the new best. What is feasible is what we should be doing. We shouldn't set a goal that ultimately, I mean, we were never going to achieve to begin with. It needs to be attainable. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong and then ultimately beat themselves up, because the goal out the gate, it was never feasible. I hope y'all enjoyed this. Thank you for tuning in. And I do appreciate you guys who are leaving me feedback on the podcast. If you would, leave a comment, leave a like. It helps the algorithm, particularly with Spotify. Leave a review. That helps a ton, apparently. I don't know. So I'm told. Thank you guys for watching. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, if you're interested in like individualized questions on Patreon, that is something that for a long time, I don't think people knew that I was offering on Patreon. $10 subscriber tier. You get individualized questions answered. You can submit your question. They can be drug questions. They can be training questions. They can just be whatever kind of questions you want. I do a monthly Q&A where I record little mini segments of podcast. I don't know. They're like sometimes like 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes. Sometimes I just go all off. If that's something that you're interested in, please check out the Patreon. Coaching one-on-one. I am accepting clients, also accepting consultations. So if you're interested in that, look in the show notes. I've got my links there. As always, thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one.